They're not good enough to start. They're not even good enough to play. But they do talk a good game. So come join Lou and Jose from the sidelines where all the best sports discussions happen anyway. Welcome in to the Benchwarmerz podcast.
Welcome into the program, everybody. I'm Lou Ruggieri. That's Jose Ortiz. And this is the Benchwarmerz podcast. Wherever, whenever, and however you happen to be listening, we appreciate you taking some time out of your day to spend it with us. We will try to make it worth your while. So sit down, take your coat off, stay a while. We've got a fantastic show for you today, and you can follow us along. I mean, you found us, so you know where to find us, but just in case, Spotify, we're on the iHeartRadio podcasting app, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and you can email us at thebenchwarmerzpodcast@yahoo.com, Benchwarmers with a Z for marketing purposes. Big time show today, very exciting. Hour 2 is going to feature some baseball. We're at the midway point through the baseball season. We're going to touch on some highlights and lowlights and kind of see what's going on in MLB. The top of hour 2, we're talking a lot of football. There's always something happening, and we are so close. I cannot wait. I'm so excited for football. I can't even put it into words. But first, this first hour is going to be all NBA because we are knee deep in NBA playoffs, and life is good right now. I mean, I never thought I'd see a Game 7 in the NBA in September, but here we are. So, Jose, we have a lot to cover. We're going to start with the Eastern Conference, and right off the bat, I mean, the Magic and the Nets were put out of their misery, thankfully, and I just wanted to get your reactions on what we've seen thus far. So, to be fair, we are recording this we record on Tuesdays mostly, so we're kind of up. We'll get you up to what we know so far. There's a Game 7 tonight, and obviously we won't know the end of that because we're going to be off the air before that. But up to this point, Jose, what has stood out to you, both good and bad, in terms of the Eastern Conference games? So you can start wherever you want.
I'll start with the bad. You mentioned that the Orlando Magic were put out of their misery. That's probably the best way to put it. They won Game 1. It was nice. There was for about 48 hours. They could feel real good about themselves, and I don't want to be making fun of them or anything, but after that, it seemed like the Bucks woke up and said, "Wait a minute, we're the Bucks. They're the Magic. They have no chance," and they had no chance. To me, when I look at the teams that have been eliminated from the postseason, I would not want to be the Orlando Magic heading into next year. They just don't really have a lot of promise on their roster. Nikolai Vucevic is probably their best player. He's okay. I'm not saying he's bad or anything like that, but he's certainly not a star. I wouldn't even put him in that second tier. He's more of like a third to fourth tier guy.
Yeah.
And so it's just they don't look very good. As far as who's looking good, we'll get into this series, but the Miami Heat, they just look. I've been saying that they're an underrated team. They're a team that presents matchup problems, and we've already seen that they just look great. They look like a really good team, and not only do they have good team chemistry and a good system, they have a great player in Jimmy Butler, who I must admit, I always knew he was a really good player. I didn't put that word great around his name, and now I'm starting to see that he is really a great player. So that's kind of the first two things that I thought of.
Yeah, and Jimmy Butler, I was all in on Jimmy Butler last year in the playoffs. You remember, I mean, we talked about it because I watched him in a big spotlight, and he was the guy who was calling for the ball. He wanted to be the one to take the last shot. He was not afraid of a big moment, and I think that we saw that in Game 1 against the Bucks. I mean, he dropped 40 points. I mean, come on. And the Bucks, I mean, you can tell. I mean, they're down 0-1 for the second series in a row now, and I actually think playing the Magic might have been not a good thing for the Bucks. I mean, in a way, you can make an argument that it was good for them because it's almost like a practice round. But I feel like they weren't tested kind of the same way that, like, say, like the Lakers or the Clippers were. And so I think the Heat are going to come in because the Heat are basically playing with house money at this point. I mean, they're not. No one's expecting the Heat to win this series. Meanwhile, Giannis and the Bucks, I mean, all the pressure is on them, and it just seems even more apparent now because I feel like we kind of harp on this over and over again. But the Bucks need something. They need somebody else aside from Giannis to really step up. And I honestly don't think anybody on their roster right now is that guy. I think they have a lot of good third options, but they don't have a strong second option. And I think that that's going to ultimately be their Achilles heel. And this might be the series where it gets exposed.
Yeah, when I was watching that game, not only did it stand out that Jimmy Butler was just fearless, they couldn't stop him. They really had no answers for him at all on the defensive side of the floor. But what really stood out to me, and we talked about this last week, Giannis, it just feels like at times he's a little limited offensively. You know, it's unfair because he's a 7-footer. You can't expect everyone to be Kevin Durant, right? Where I'll get you inside, I'll get you outside. He's a center, and that's where he's a paint player. And we talked about last week, can you win when your best player is the big guy, is a center? And yesterday, one of the things I noticed, he was 4 of 12 from the free throw line. He shoots 63% from the free throw, shot 63% from the free throw line this regular season. So that's right there a liability. Then you look at the fact that the Miami Heat, they can hit threes all over the place. Like it's not just Jimmy Butler. There's Tyler Hero. There's just
Dragic.
a number. Dragic. There's a number of players that come in. And they also in the interior they have Bam Adebayo, who can at least make life difficult for Giannis.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I always say, and I'm just an old school kind of basketball guy where I really look at the fundamentals. The way you beat a team that on paper looks better than you is you beat them with the free throw line, you beat them by having fewer turnovers, and you beat them by hitting 3-point shots. And the Heat hit 3-point shots. They only missed 2 free throws. They were 25 of 27, and Milwaukee was 14 of 26 from the free throw line. And then the other thing I forgot about is they also had the rebounding edge. They had a 46 to 34 rebounding edge over the Bucks. So it just felt like if Giannis is not putting up 35 to 40 points a game, they're going to be in trouble this series.
Yeah, I think, Giannis, it's worth mentioning that Giannis was 1 assist away from having a triple-double. And again, for a guy who's, for all intents and purposes, a center, playing forward, I guess, technically, if Brook Lopez is out there. But, that's a pretty good stat line. 10 rebounds, 9 assists, and 18 points is a pretty well-rounded game. But just like you said, the Bucks need Giannis to drop 35, 40 points basically every game because they can't rely on anybody else. Middleton and Lopez are good, but they're hot and cold. And it feels like they don't have that next gear.
It kind of reminds me of LeBron's Cleveland Cavaliers when they didn't have Kyrie Irving and LeBron had to score 40 points for them to even
points every game.
Have an opportunity to score. Like for them to even have a chance to do anything, he had to drop 40.
It's actually a really good comparison. Yeah.
If he didn't drop 40, they were going to get blown out. Like that's basically the way it feels right now. Now it's just one game. I don't want to overreact. The Bucks were the best team in the NBA for a reason, but it just feels like the Heat are just rolling right now. The Bucks are not very good at defending a 3-point shot. The Heat are very good at knocking down a 3-point shot. It's just a bad matchup, and they need more from Giannis. They need him to be They need him to be the best player in the game right now.
Yeah, I agree. And then the winner of that series is going to play the winner of the other series that we see going on in the East, the Celtics and Raptors. And as of today, actually, the Celtics just beat the Raptors again. So the Raptors are down 0-2 right now. And the Celtics, I don't know if the Celtics are that good or maybe the Sixers were that bad. Because, the Raptors playing the Nets, I don't think there was anybody that thought that the Raptors were going to lose that series.
No.
The Sixers, I feel like people thought they had a chance, but the Celtics just crushed them. And, I keep saying it every week, but Jason Tatum is a superstar. I know everybody talks about Luka and everything, but Tatum's right there in terms of that next wave of great player. It's, if you put Luka 1, you're putting Jason Tatum maybe 2, possibly 3 at worst. And they just play. It's amazing because Brad Stevens is probably the only coach I can think of, maybe aside from Popovich, who can rival Nick Nurse in terms of being creative and using all of the pieces at his disposal at any given point in the game.
Yeah, I was thoroughly impressed with the Boston Celtics, and I have to say I've probably underrated just how good the Celtics were. I was so enthralled with the Raptors and how they just so easily dispatched the Nets.
Yeah.
And the Nets are not a good team, but I was just looking at, wow, they just destroyed them. I think they won by more than 20 points a game, so it wasn't even close.
Yeah.
And right now, it looks like the Boston Celtics defense is too much for the Raptors, and I think that's maybe I overrated Van Vliet and Norman Powell, and to some extent Pascal Siakam through the first two games. I think he's 11 of 31 from the field. That's not getting it done. That's barely 30% right there. And then you look at the 3-point line. That once again, when your best player is not a perimeter player, if in today's NBA, it just feels like you're a little limited. The Celtics, 17 of 39 from the 3-point line in game one, 15 of 38 from the 3-point line in game two. Raptors in game one, 10 of 40 from the 3-point line. In game two, 11 of 40 from the 3-point line. That's not getting it done. You've got to be able to hit the three more consistently, more efficiently. I'm not backing down from my pick now. I already said that the Raptors in 6, so I'm not going to be one of these guys who flips my pick now. Oh, they lost two. I think the Raptors. Listen, they're
on pace. They're on pace for 6.
They're also on pace for 4. So I mean, that's 4 in the bad way.
Yeah, I was trying to help there.
They don't have the Raptors have championship mettle. I would expect them to come out looking really strong in game 3, but the Celtics are a dangerous team that I underestimated. Yeah,
and the Celtics just outplayed the Raptors from top to bottom. And like you said, they were at almost 40% for their 3-point shooting versus 27.5 for the Raptors. Even the free throws, 23 to 25.
Yeah,
was 92% versus 84%. I mean, it
was a 4-point game today, wasn't it? I mean, they lost by 4. So those are the differences. Those small in playoff basketball.
Or 3
That's
points.
what happens.
Yeah. And so again, from top to bottom, I mean, Tatum, Brown, Kemba, Kemba didn't look great today, but he showed up big late. Marcus Smart, you get almost 20 points from him off kind of just coming out of nowhere. They're just, they work so well together. They're unselfish. They pass the ball, and it seems like they're all working together instead of sort of, when I watch the Raptors lately, it feels like it's Fred Van Vliet kind of just trying to take it on he's trying to be James Harden a little bit, where he's just, he just doesn't even look to pass. He just walks up and pops the 3 without starting any sort of offensive scheme at all. And then Pascal Siakam is great, but yeah, like you said, I mean, he's a big man, and I don't know. I'm not a big fan unless like you said again, if you're Kevin Durant, that's one thing, but I don't really want my big man out on the perimeter jacking up 3s. Like, you're bigger than the other guys. Go use that. I'd rather give me the safe 2 instead of gambling on 3s over and over and over and over. And we're seeing the product of that with the Rockets in the West. So,
I mean, the one thing I will also just add, and I think you just kind of touched on it, it feels like Pascal Siakam, very similar to Giannis, has to be great. It's like, if Jason Tatum has a bad game, maybe Marcus Smart steps up, maybe Kemba Walker steps up, maybe Jaylen Brown steps up. Who steps up if Pascal Siakam goes 4 of 16? It doesn't seem like we can really rely on Kyle Lowry to really be much more than a mid to high teen scorer. He's not dropping 30-something anymore. And you need a guy who can drop 30. I feel like I wish there was some research I could do on this, but I can't imagine too many teams that go very deep in the playoffs don't have players who can score around 30 a game. Like, you need that guy. And it just feels like, I don't know. It just feels like if Siakam's not great, the Raptors have no chance.
So out of the teams that lost in the East, I mean, who do you feel best about going into next year? I know you said that the
Magic are in the worst shape. Magic are in the worst shape.
Yeah.
They just have there's just every team. If you just look at it, every team that's going to go far needs to have a centerpiece kind of franchise player.
Well, what if you're the Sixers?
No.
What do you do when you're the Sixers? Like, because Brett Brown's out, the process is processed. That's over and done with. Do you keep Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, or do you just say, you know what, start over?
I keep them because I don't. Starting over means that you have to lose again and have a number one pick. Like, you're not. That's the thing that sucks about being one of these middle teams that lose in the first round. You're most likely not getting a franchise changing player at the 18th pick or whatever pick they would be. It just doesn't happen that often, especially in this upcoming draft where I don't even know who's really a needle mover like that. To me, I think you might even have to trade a first round pick away just to get out of the Al Horford, Tobias Harris contract. Like, you have to get out of one of those contracts.
Yeah, what are they? Like $200 million tied up in those guys?
Well, next year, I think Tobias Harris, now don't throw up when I say this, but I think Tobias Harris makes $34 million next season. God. And if I'm not mistaken, Al Horford is on the hook for $27 million. So, like I said, don't throw up. It's hard to stomach.
And this from the same team that didn't want to pay Jimmy Butler $100 million, and then they decided, pay an aging Al Horford, who is the epitome of good, not great.
If I'm the Sixers, I have an affinity for this guy. I don't know, maybe he's not as good of a coach as I think he is. Mm-hmm. I'm targeting Mark Jackson. Mark Jackson, to me, is a guy who maybe gets overlooked for, you look, when you left, the Golden State Warriors took off and became a dynasty. Well, you have to give him some credit for laying the groundwork a little bit there.
And they were a 50-win team that season that he was.
It's true.
That he got let go.
I want to get in a old school, hard nosed, no nonsense head coach who's going to come in there and just shape things up. I just feel like Brett Brown got maybe a little too comfortable in his position.
Yeah.
Maybe too comfortable with losing, as you alluded to a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Just kind of in that culture of losing. They need to hit a reset button, and I think they need to get a guy like Mark Jackson in there. I don't know exactly what their options are as a free agent. From what I've been reading, they're going to have to probably package a first-round pick just to get rid of one of those players, either Tobias Harris or Al Horford, which is really a shame to have to do something like that. But I don't really know what else you do because you are not winning with that roster. But I was just saying the team that I think is in the best position is the Nets because they're adding Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving next year. So
Mark Jackson's a good suggestion. I think Tyronn Lue, if they could get him there, has proven that he can work through adversity and he can handle big egos and superstars and kind of just make the most out of it and not take crap from mouthy players. And anybody that can deal with the circus that LeBron brings to town. I mean, not that he's ever the real problem. I mean, he's a little bit of a problem sometimes.
Yeah, but, he's got his issues.
Yeah, but I mean, it's clear that Tyronn Lue's been able to handle that kind of pressure. And I think the Sixers, I mean, those fans, Philly fans they're desperate. It's been good, not great, and they've been told over and over again, like, don't worry, the process is going to work. We're going to get through it, and we're going to be better. And that hasn't happened, and I don't think it's going to happen until major, major changes are made. And
Who's your pick for the team that's in best position heading into next season?
I honestly think it's either the Sixers or the Nets.
Okay.
I think it's the Nets just because they were able to do and make it this far with, basically people we haven't heard of. And so, they were, it was like an open casting call to bring people to Orlando in the bubble. And you're bringing back 2 of the top 10 players in the NBA, if not even higher than that, when they're healthy. And that's a good problem to have. Is like, well, we have too much talent. We're going to put all these guys. That's not a bad thing because then, Kevin Durant's been out for almost 2 years now. So, you would think the intelligent approach for that would be to limit his minutes initially and kind of let him quite literally get his feet back under him. And same thing with Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving is brittle. He's proven that he's not, he's injury prone. So maybe a little load management goes a long way for the Nets next year.
And as far as the Sixers, like you're saying, I think because you said the Sixers or the Nets, because I agree with everything you said about the Nets. The Nets are in perfect position to, at least you would imagine, at least advance a round further.
Yeah.
We just need someone who's going to get the most out of Ben Simmons, and I don't think we've seen that. We just haven't. There's no way I can believe that Ben Simmons is at his ceiling right now. There has to be more, and we need to see him develop as a perimeter player.
I agree. But all right, so we're gonna take a quick break, and then we're gonna come back. We have a whole bunch of Western Conference stuff in the NBA to deal with, so we'll deal with that and some more. Follow us along: iHeartRadio podcasting app, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. Email us the Benchwarmerz podcast at yahoo.com, and we'll be right back with a little Western Conference discussion on the Benchwarmers. Stick around.
If you're sick with COVID-19 or think you might have it, take steps to help protect other people from getting sick. Stay home except to get medical care. Call the doctor before visiting. Separate yourself from others who live with you. Wear a cloth face covering to protect others. Cover your coughs and sneezes with a tissue and clean your hands right away. Avoid sharing items with other people in your home. This includes things like towels and bedding. Be sure dishes are washed in hot water or the dishwasher before anyone else uses them. Stay aware of how you feel. If you start to have difficulty breathing or if you're worried about your health, call your doctor. For more tips, visit cdc.gov.
Welcome back to the Benchwarmers podcast, where being all talk is actually a good thing. Now, back to the action. Or talk, I guess.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. I'm Lou, that's Jose, and this is still the Benchwarmers podcast. We appreciate you taking a little bit of your day to spend it with us. And fun show so far. A lot of Eastern Conference NBA playoffs. We're going to touch on the Western Conference NBA playoffs in just a second. Hour 2 coming up. We're talking all NFL until the second half of the hour, when we're going to switch over to a little baseball, check in and see what's going on there. But first, Jose, I realized I was so excited to start talking about the playoffs that we kind of brushed right past sort of the bigger issue at hand that we saw this past week. And the NBA playoff boycott that happened this week it happened. And I think you and I are in a unique position to be able to comment on this from, opposite sides of the racial spectrum, I guess. Even though it's weird to think of it like that, because
don't ever think of it that way. Don't worry.
No, I've never been so aware of my skin color as I have in the last few months, and it's a little disturbing. But that's not the statement I have to make. So I wanted to give you the floor first, and just kind of see what, if any, impact this boycott had on either you or what you think it might have on the world, really.
So I just want to start by saying that I applaud the players for trying to make a stand. Mm-hmm. I don't, it's not a groundbreaking statement here. Police shouldn't have the right to issue the death penalty. Yeah. We have laws, we have due process, and everyone has a right to that. And it's honestly a comply or die is a violation of human rights. But the boycott just felt a little hollow to me. It was first of all, it came out of nowhere. I was like, oh, all right, they're boycotting. And then all of a sudden everyone's boycotting, and it happened. Some MLB teams boycotted, some WNBA teams boycotted, MLS teams boycotted. It was out of nowhere, and it was like, okay, fine, they're taking a stand. They're what's going to happen next? I remember texting you about it, like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. And then the next day they announced that they're going to play again. And I was like, oh, all right. So I don't really know. To answer your question about the impact, I hate to be like cynical and callous about it, but actual impact, I don't think it really had any actual impact. Maybe in their minds, which is important too. Yeah. Maybe they felt like, hey, we don't want to act like this is nothing. We don't want to just go on as business as usual. We want to stop, have a grieving period, and then move forward. But I don't think, as far as raising awareness for police brutality or fighting for reform, I don't look at this as some momentous event that has a huge impact. I'm sorry, it just doesn't feel that way to me.
Well, I'm going to choose my words carefully here because I don't
Yeah.
want to say anything kind of off the cuff. So the boycott was obviously in response to the police shooting of a 29-year-old black man, Jacob Blake, in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Yes.
Okay. He was shot 7 times in the back. I mean, that kind of just speaks for itself. I mean, you shoot somebody 7 times in the back, it doesn't really matter what they were doing or what the circumstances were. That's a little excessive, to say the least. The boycott, I was surprised and I wasn't surprised by. And what kind of stuck out to me was I felt like this sort of the same way you did. I felt like that it was a great display of solidarity and unity across the sports world, not just basketball. But it felt like it was a bit not completely thought out. It was a little short-sighted because what I kept asking and no one had an answer to was, okay, so they're boycotting. So like, what are their demands? What are they saying they want in exchange for coming back to play these games? And there was no clear, I mean, not that it's a ransom or a heist or something, but I mean, it's like, hey, we're sitting out until we get X, Y, and Z. And there was no X, Y, and Z. It was just like, well, do you want a promise from an elected official that reform is coming? Do you want this cop to be thrown in jail? I mean, what's the end game here? And that is the only thing that bothered me. I do think that the players can spin this in a way for them by saying something to the effect of, or kind of giving the idea that, hey, we just showed you that we have the power to do this and we can stop this. We can quite literally take our ball and go home if what we are saying is not hitting home with you. And I think that maybe now that they've done it, they can kind of have better meetings. They can have more meetings. They can think it through a little more and come up with some kind of tangible result that they can demand in exchange for, this, but keep playing. Obviously they wanted to show that they can stop playing, and they did. So now you have to do something with that. You have to say, okay, well, we're going to do this again unless you do this. And until there's a very tangible goal, I mean, it's a good idea, but it's lacking. It seemed like it lacked a little bit of planning, I guess. That's about all I can say.
Thank you for correcting me. Obviously, Blake was not killed. He was paralyzed. He was shot 7 times, and I misspoke. Yeah. So thank you for correcting me.
Mm-hmm. So okay, that's it. I mean, we're not a political show. We're not really we're a sports show. So obviously it had to deal with sports. So I just wanted to kind of have us touch on it and kind of say our piece. And I'll just say that I'm glad that basketball is back, obviously.
The only thing I'll add is I just worry if this happens again, it feels like what recourse do they have now? Are they going to boycott and then come back again in 3 days? Like I don't know. It just seems like you said, very short-sighted. They need a plan.
They have to come up with a demand. And if God forbid something like this happens again, they have to say, look, we told you, we showed you, we told you, this is it. Now this has to be fixed. Either this guy goes to jail, or we need some kind of reform, or we need a promise from somebody high up in writing that's going to say, okay, we're on it. We're dealing with it. It's going to take a while, but we're going to get it done. Or else, sorry, your playoffs are done. We're going home. And, they're going to have to sacrifice, and it's going to crush the NBA, the union agreement that they have. But, that's, if they're all doing it, it's going to be tough for those owners. Those owners are going to look real bad if they rip up the CBA and say, oh, sorry, you guys screwed us over. That's wouldn't be in their best interest. So maybe they do have a little more power than maybe even we think. So, But that being said, let's move on a little bit. It's time for some Western Conference discussions. This is the Benchwarmerz podcast. We talked Eastern Conference. And so the Western Conference, I feel like the Western Conference was far more exciting, but there's less to talk about. I think, the Mavericks lost in Game 6, and I kind of want to start there.
Okay.
I personally Luka, I mean, this isn't breaking news, but Luka Doncic is amazing.
Yeah.
He
Really
is phenomenal. And I think I was really kind of convinced there that they were going to upset the Clippers, and I think Marcus Morris needs to be suspended for a game, honestly, after what, being thrown out. And I think after his being thrown out of Game 6, it sort of put what he did in a previous game, targeting Luka's ankle, where he kind of just tried to play it off like, no, I wasn't doing anything. I think it kind of puts that in perspective a little bit better. And I think the NBA should kind of, a one-game suspension, I think it would be justified.
I agree.
And so the Mavericks, I mean, what do you think? How could the Mavericks have gotten over this hump if they come up to this? Because there's a good chance that we're going to see this series again next year.
Yeah.
What do the Mavericks need to be able to beat the Clippers in a 7-game series?
This needs to be a season of soul searching for the Mavericks. I don't mean to be all melodramatic about it, but they need to sit down as a team and watch one of the episodes, I don't remember which one, of The Last Dance, where the Bulls were devastated after losing to the Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals,
mm-hmm.
and got completely beat up. And that's exactly what happened to the Mavericks. They were just pushed around, manhandled, muscled, and just beat up by the Clippers, who, I think you and I were talking about this, just a more savvy veteran team that just knew how to kind of get at the Mavericks. And if I'm the Mavericks, if I'm Rick Carlisle and I'm talking to Luka Doncic, I'm talking to Porzingis, this has got to be a summer where you live in the gym. You live in the gym, hitting the weights. You need to. I mean, I don't want to take any of Luka's explosiveness or speed away from him, but he's got to get. They just need to be tougher as a team, and I think it starts with Luka. I think he gets pushed around a little bit too easily, and he's got to be able to dish some of the contact, or dish some of the punishment, I should say, especially as often as he goes into the paint. As often as it just feels like he hits the ground all the time. He's always getting contact.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think he needs to get tougher. It's just that.
Yeah, I think ironically, what the Mavericks need is the thing that was kind of the thorn in their side this whole series, in a guy like Marcus Morris, where they need sort of that enforcer, whether it's a defensive enforcer guy, sort of a Rodman, Draymond Green kind of guy, where it's just, you need somebody to do the dirty work. Because, Luka is going to be the superstar, so you don't really want him getting into scuffles and things like. Because look at what the Clippers did. They didn't send, it wasn't Kawhi that was getting in trouble. They were just like, hey, guy that's sitting on the bench and not really doing anything. Why don't you go tussle things up a little bit? And I think Porzingis tried to be that guy a little bit, but it wasn't.
That's not Porzingis.
Yeah, that's not in his nature. He's not that intimidating.
I just feel like you're not going to see anyone doing that to LeBron James, right? No one's pushing him around because LeBron James dishes the punishment out. You're not doing that to Kawhi Leonard because Kawhi Leonard's ridiculously strong, and you can't really do that to him. You've got to be at a point physically where you can't be manhandled. You can't be pushed around.
Yeah.
Or someone, and I think, and listen, Luka's only 21 years old. 21. He's got to fill up. He's not done growing physically. And you hit on another point. They need defensive. They need a defensive identity in the interior. So yes, completely with Draymond Green or whatever. Andre Drummond's a free agent next season. So
yeah, and I think the Pistons analogy is perfect because the Pistons, when Michael Jordan first faced the Pistons, the Pistons were a much more physical team, and they beat the crap out of Jordan over and over and over again until finally, you get over that hump and you make it. But same thing with Pistons. The Pistons had to get over the Celtics. It was just it's just how it goes. And the Mavericks, the Clippers are the Pistons to the Mavericks Bulls. And I will say, I walked away from that game, the Clippers, and Paul George has potential. His ceiling is crazy high. I think his floor is very low.
Yeah.
But what I saw that impressed me the most was Kawhi doing what he did last year, where he just towards the end of Game 6, he just took it on his shoulders and said, "Give me the ball," and he was unstoppable. I mean, he just hit those little mid-range jumpers and fadeaways, and he found a spot and he just drained it. And calm, cool, collected. He's cyborg, and it was I was like, wow, okay, that dude. I don't think he's as great as everyone. He's not the greatest offensive and defense two-way player I've ever seen, but he's pretty damn good.
Yeah, he's a great player. His offense is so easy. I often compare him against James Harden, and it feels like James Harden's working so hard to score, and it just comes so easily. Kawhi Leonard just up. I'm in a spot. I'm just going to shoot it now. No one can block me. I'm going to fade away. It's going to go in nothing but net. I do want to say that I think that you still have to consider this season a success for the Mavericks. I don't want to completely rain on their parade. I think there's still a successful season. Absolutely. They just went up against a better team, and Paul George is a guy who. It's funny, you're looking at it like his ceiling is so high. I'm actually starting to look at him as an offensive liability, where you're okay. Well, like he doesn't feel like that dangerous of a scorer right now. I don't know what his postseason average was this year. I just felt like every time I looked up, his numbers were not impressive, and Kawhi was just a steady force where he just 28, 30, 30, 28, 32. Like it just, and it didn't feel like Paul George had a couple like low team games, not really the offensive force that I thought he was. So, but they didn't need him to be. So maybe when they need him to be in another series, that he'll step up. But I was not impressed with Paul George.
Yeah, and speaking of James Harden, like you just talked about.
Yeah.
The Rockets and the Oklahoma City Thunder are tied going into a Game 7. It's 3 games apiece, and I'm going to be the first one to admit I am shocked that this is going to 7 games. I'm pretty sure that I said that the Rockets were going to sweep the Thunder, and wow, I couldn't have been more wrong. And so it's the Rockets. Are the Rockets that bad, or are the Oklahoma City Thunder that good?
The Rockets are that bad. It's not about – I don't want to take anything away from Oklahoma City, but what I realized about the Rockets when I was watching the last game, especially looking at Russell Westbrook just completely just having a terrible game, when they don't – outside of James Harden, they don't really have an offensive threat that scares you. There's not really someone on the team where you're like, oh, my goodness, we have to make sure we get a hand in his face. Yeah. All right, PJ Tucker, shoot the three-pointer. I don't care. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't matter. All right, Gordon, take an open jumper. You're going to probably miss anyway.
Covington not scaring you.
Yeah, no. And then when you add the fact that for whatever reason they just refuse to drive to the basket. I don't understand why they won't attack the basket. Once again, this was a close game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Houston, 9 of 12 from the free throw line. Oklahoma City, 16 of 18 from the free throw line. That's your ball game right there. Yeah. That's the game. And the Oklahoma City, once again, what's the formula? Rebounding, turnovers, free throws. Oklahoma City, 51 rebounds. Houston, 41 rebounds. Oklahoma City, 19 turnovers. Houston, 22 turnovers. Now, 6 of those were Russell Westbrook. My point is, when James Harden's on fire, and if you notice, all the games the Rockets win are blowouts. So it's basically when the Rockets are hitting their shots, they win. But if they're not on fire, if they're not knocking down everything, they just don't seem to be able to win a grinded out type of game, which is all Oklahoma City wants to do. Grind it out, low scoring, close game, win it at the end. Oklahoma City's executing at the end. Chris Paul's playing his best basketball in the fourth quarter. And for whatever reason, the Rockets don't even have the ball in James Harden's hand to close out the game. I don't understand what's happening.
Well, I think the reason for that blowout or get blown out is because, I mean, the Rockets live and die by the three worse than or as well as anybody I've ever seen. I mean, they have taken what the Warriors were doing and just jacked up to ridiculous proportions. And the problem is that James Harden and I don't know who else, Russell Westbrook, no, Robert Covington are not. He's a center. What's he doing? PJ Tucker. So James Harden and PJ Tucker are not Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. So you're not going to have that kind of success. And it's, the Rockets, if I'm playing the Rockets, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do everything I can. I'll let James Harden. You know what? If James Harden can have 30 points or less, I'm winning that game.
Yeah.
Because James Harden is the only, like you said, he's the only scorer on that team. So I'm going to double him every single time. I'm going to beg Russell Westbrook to take that jump shot that he can't really hit very well, or have one of these other guys, be put in a spot where they need to make a shot, and they're probably not going to do it because nobody's that special outside of Harden.
And it also feels like one of the key markers of a really good team is being able to win in multiple ways. It just doesn't feel like the Rockets can win any other way other than hitting the three. Where all of a sudden, if that three is gone, they have no way of winning, and that's not a recipe. You're not going far if that's what you can do. If that's the best you can do.
Yeah, and so I think the winner of that series plays the Lakers.
Yeah,
and so that's going to be interesting. And I don't think we'll talk about that more next week. But if the Rockets win this, I don't think that there's a worse matchup for a team that's 6'7" and shorter than the Lakers, who have 3 legit 7-footers on their team.
Plus LeBron James
and LeBron, who's 260 and 6'9" as a point guard for all intents and purposes. So we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
The last matchup that we have seen, and the game's going on right now. It's at halftime. The Jazz and the Nuggets. Right now, the Nuggets are up 50-36, which is pretty impressive. I thought that I picked the Jazz to win the series, but it's kind of ironic. I feel like I owe both of these teams an apology because I thought that the Jazz and Nuggets was going to be just a boring series because they just don't have a lot of star power. And I was wrong.
It's been the most exciting series.
Yep, I've been completely wrong. It's been two of the most incredible performances by individual players that I think we've seen in the playoffs in a long time. And Jamal Murray, welcome to the NBA. I mean, talk about a coming out party. I mean, he's been around, but I think he averaged 18 points in the regular season, and he's averaged like 48 in the last 3 games or so. And so between him and Donovan Mitchell, I mean, it's been fun. And I don't know where this series is going, but I do kind of feel like they're going to be burnt out from the emotional high of this game. And we saw Jamal Murray kind of get a little choked up at the end of Game 6 after his second 50-point performance. And I'm kind of worried that whoever wins this game is just going to be out of gas when they face the Clippers, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, that's probably the same situation for Oklahoma City and Houston. That just you go to a Game 7, the other teams have been waiting. They're just sitting there waiting for you.
Yep.
Yeah. Listen, you're seeing the birth of 2 NBA stars right now, right in front of our eyes. That's what I love about the postseason of the NBA. I feel like it's unlike other sports. I don't know, maybe I'm hyperbolic right now because all we have is basketball, but it just feels like every NBA season, or every NBA postseason, I should say, there's some new stars born, or some star that shine a little brighter than we realized. And I think lost in the Luka Doncic show has been Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell just going back and forth. Honestly, I don't even know which player is better because at first I was like, oh, it's not even close. It's Donovan Mitchell. And then I'm starting, Jamal Murray is really, really good.
Yeah.
I still think I give the edge to Donovan Mitchell, but I don't. Murray is a great, great player. I think that I picked the Nuggets, and I think I picked the Nuggets in 7 to win because I knew it was going to be a tight series.
Yep.
But I mean, I agree with you. I don't think they have a chance against the Clippers, but I do think the Nuggets would have a better chance against the Clippers than the Jazz because I think Jokic gives that second option on the offensive side, and Rudy Gobert is more of that defensive player first for the Utah Jazz.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they have Mike Conley Jr. and everything like that, but I look at the Jazz. I look at the Jazz being in more of a disadvantage should they advance than the Nuggets.
Yeah, and it's going to be an interesting end of the series. And moving on, I mean, we saw the Lakers close out the Blazers, and the Blazers. I mean, just to kind of put a final stamp on them, the Blazers. They played admirably. I mean, they were in play. They basically played playoff games from the beginning of the bubble, and it was a shame to see Damian Lillard get hurt. C.J. McCollum with a broken bone in his back. I mean, you have to give them credit, and I think that I feel like they're one piece away from really being that next superstar team. Because they're superstars on the team, but the team itself, I think, is one big, and it's somebody big. I mean, they need a strong defensive inside presence that they don't have, and the Lakers, expose that, and here we are.
Yeah, and it's kind of similar to the Mavericks in a way, where they just need that defensive identity. The one thing I noticed, and this is why if I was Portland, I'd be looking to move on from my head coach. I mean, he's been terrible in the postseason. I think he's been with the team for 6 seasons now, and this year to me for the Trailblazers, I know that they were in playoff mode in the bubble, and this is a disappointment. They were in the Western Conference Finals last year, and they just got bounced in the first round of the NBA playoffs. So I don't see how you can look at that as a success. I do think it was an admirable fight from behind, and maybe that's what will save Terry Stott's job. But
I mean, I think the injuries buy him another season because I mean, that's you can take away your star player. I mean, that's
I just my main indictment against Terry Stotts or whomever would take the blame here is they just don't have an offensive system to me. It feels like, you look at the Lakers, right? Just juxtaposed in the Lakers. Mm-hmm. LeBron brings the ball down. They move the ball around they move the ball around the court. They're passing the ball. They're looking for open guys, cutters, guys who have a good shot. It feels like the Blazers are just dribbling the ball down and just trying to get any sort of window to shoot a long shot, whether it's Carmelo Anthony, Damian Lillard, or CJ McCollum. When they're making them, it's, oh my gosh, how amazing are they? But there's just so many bad shots that they take. And it just makes me like, why didn't you move the ball? Why is no one cutting into the rim? Why is Damian Lillard never open for 3? Why are all his shots contested? Why don't they have any easy baskets? Their offense was so difficult. And you're right. They need defense too, because you have to be able to win on the other side of the ball, but on the other side of the court. But you have to be able to manufacture some baskets without these low percentage shots. Then it just feels like they were relying too much on low percentage shots, and they were exposed, as you said, after game 1.
Yeah, I think that. I think that's a referendum you can have on the entire league. Quite honestly, is that it's just the analytics have kind of. I mean, it's interesting to watch. I mean, we get guys like Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell who are just crushing threes and putting up these gaudy numbers. I mean, it's impressive. But then you get a game, where I think what the Rockets last year, they missed like 27 straight 3-pointers or something.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Yeah, it was disgusting. So it's bad to it's a bad product to put on TV. I mean, it's still entertainment, and so nobody wants to see just somebody walk over the half court and just jack up a 3-pointer. Without
I'm not saying you can't shoot the 3-point. I think people have misinterpreted what happened with the Golden State Warriors and say, oh, you should just dribble over the court and just shoot from half court. No, that's not what they do. Yeah. They are that good where they can knock those shots down, so it kind of makes it more scary. They have amazing ball movement, and they step into 3-pointers with the ball hitting them, usually with a rotational guy running for his life to put a hand in one of their faces. They're not just walking down the court and just jacking up threes. Yeah. And that's the issue. You need an offense. You need to run a system and manufacture open 3-point shots.
I agree. And we'll see if they do that and take your advice in this next round. So that's going to do it for hour 1. We're all set. And so hopefully we'll see how the rest of this game 7 goes. I'm very excited to kind of watch that. So if I sound a little bit distracted, it's because I'm watching game 7. But we're going to take
watching on my phone.
Full disclosure. I just want to be, fully transparent. So we're going to take a break. We're going to come back next hour. We have some midseason baseball storylines to touch on. And coming up next, we have a whole litany of football moves that we get to talk about, and I'm super excited for it because football season's right around the corner. And so hour 2 is also right around the corner, so stick around. We'll be right back on the Benchwarmerz podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Benchwarmers Podcast. Follow along with us on the Benchwarmers Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to review us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.